It is 4 p.m. We bring developing news.
And the stories behind the headlines. This is Storycon. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Ed Lingao. Some stories are watching this Monday, March 23. Both Manibela and the No to Oil Price Hike Coalition announced a two-day transport strike this coming Thursday and Friday. Composed of various public transportation sectors, the groups warn or want government to, among others, remove the value-added tax and the excise tax on petroleum, roll back diesel prices to 55 pesos per liter, junk the oil deregulation law, put in place fuel price controls, and implement a fare hike. The group aims to paralyze approximately 70% of trips on March 26 and March 27. For its part, the Philippine National Police will deploy 180,000 personnel to rally sites to maintain order and provide free rides to stranded commuters.
Malacanang has dismissed concerns of an oil crisis in the country, saying that fuel supply remains adequate despite rising prices. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro explained that while there is no supply crisis, a quote-unquote price disruption is being felt due to developments in the Middle East. Earlier, President Marcos said the country currently has oil stockpiles sufficient to cover up to 60 days of needs. He has also pushed for the creation of a so-called crisis committee amid the Middle East crisis.
Meantime, the PNP says the number of gas stations that have closed amid the rising fuel prices has risen to 403. The figure climbed from 273 as authorities continue to monitor operations of over 14,000 stations nationwide. The PNP says it is working with the Department of Energy to investigate possible hoarding or profiteering behind the closures.
Iran threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz once again. That's following a 48-hour ultimatum from U.S. President Donald Trump to reopen the vital global oil artery. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps also warned that it would target companies with U.S. ownership if the United States attacks Iranian energy facilities, I should say. Iran said it did not start the war but will defend its infrastructure and national interests if provoked. And United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres warns that the planet is being pushed beyond its limits, with all key climate indicators, quote, flashing red. The UN says the amount of heat trapped by the Earth reached record levels in 2025. Guterres described this situation as a global climate emergency.
And joining us today, both on Zoom, Storycon's resident political heckler, Tito Rol Yemas. Well, he's not yet here. Okay. The other Zoomer. Ronald, you better turn on your camera because your Zoom is showing something else. Anyway, let's go back to Ronald in a bit. Our other Zoomer is Star Editor-in-Chief, Ami Pamintuan.
Zoomer.
Hi, everyone. Happy Monday.
You prefer Zoomer or
Sana
Boomer?
happy week
I knew you were
natin.
going to say that. Zoomer or boomer?
Zoomer.
Zoomer.
Oo, nag-may I go out yata si Ronald. Nakikita ko na yung pero wala siya.
Oo nga eh. May makulit na yan. Sige, okay lang yan.
Oo.
Major breaking stories. Trump gave 2 days for Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. Otherwise, they'll start bombing or start destroying Iranian oil facilities, which they have not yet targeted. I understand they started bombing parts of Karg Island earlier.
Power plants.
They started bombing parts of Karg Island earlier, pero only the military facilities on that island. It will be a different thing altogether if they go for...
Pinakompute ko nga yung deadline Wednesday pa pala dito sa atin yun.
Sa Wednesday pa? Okay.
Yes,
Oo,
Wednesday
pinacheck ko
daytime, our time.
Yeah. Oo, Wednesday pa.
So
Akala ko by tomorrow
Oo nga eh.
Di ba, dapat pagsalita niya within ngayon, 48 hours,
So hindi pala. May palugit pala.
Oo, may konting palugit. Oo, Wednesday pa.
Okay.
Hindi kasi I think some of the allies are talking to Iran Tinitingnan nila So, tingnan natin. Baka medyo maganda-ganda ang ano natin. At saka sabi ni Sharon Garin, within the week daw, we're locking in 500 million barrels of diesel. I'm not sure kung million yun, ha? Parang
No,
dami.
it doesn't sound like million, Ami. It's
$500,
Malacanang said 440,000 barrels are already in the pipeline, and another
Pero ito ay nilalock in pa lang daw.
Yeah. So Malacanang says 440,000 barrels are already in the pipeline, and another 600,000 barrels are expected. This is, I think,
konti lang yun, ha?
This is part of the 2 million barrels that they had initially announced last week. But
406, so 1 million.
440 already on the way.
Yeah, 1 million.
Working out another 600. Part of the 2 million barrels or so that they announced last week.
That's around what? Good for 2 days?
But I don't know if it's just me, but it feels like there's a bit of a disconnect because Malacanang says there's no oil crisis.
No oil supply crisis.
Supply is sufficient, but they are creating a crisis committee to tackle this issue. So I'm not sure which is which. And if Malacanang doesn't want to call it, can I call it? Pwede ba ako? There is a crisis because it's not just about the supply, it's about the prices. And whether or not...
May committee for a crisis, pero walang crisis.
Yeah, that's why. So, help me understand it.
It's a pre-crisis committee.
Hindi naman
PCC.
PCC. Hindi naman yung sinabi pre-crisis committee. It's called the crisis committee.
The next thing they'll say it's foresight.
No. Foresight was 3 weeks ago. Foresight was 3 months ago. 6, I don't know.
Kasi,
siguro mas accurate kung magkaka-crisis committee.
Kaya nga, they might call it nga foresight. What's the word that was used by a congressman?
Premonition.
Premonition.
Si Ronald gumamit noon.
Premonition.
Si congressman.
Hindi, ginamit talaga ni Congressman.
Ginamit talaga?
Was it Congressman Marcoleta, si Paolo Marcoleta.
Saying he had a premonition.
May premonition.
Kasi daw si Kiko D disrupted before already a Senate hearing, and he has a premonition that he will also disrupt the Congress hearing.
That particular
That's why he
hearing.
wanted to eject Kiko D. He used the word premonition, if I remember correctly. And that's where it's coming from.
This is not that, because we are day 22 into this crisis, into this war.
You used the word crisis again.
Kaya nga, that's what I'm saying.
There's no crisis.
If Malacanang doesn't want to call,
At day 22 of the non-crisis.
Can I call it?
Accurate.
Somebody give me the power to call it, because this is a fuel price crisis. It may not be a supply crisis yet, but the fact that we're talking to several other countries...
You don't even know it's not...
You don't even know. But the fact that we're talking to several countries, including Russia, which Foreign Affairs Secretary Teresa Lazaro confirmed, the fact that we're, alongside many other countries, are scrambling around looking for other sources of fuel means there's a problem. And then there's also the other fact that prices have now skyrocketed. Baka umabot tayo sa point na maraming hindi na maka-afford.
Sabi ni Sharon Garin, hanggang first week of May ang ating supply. Our supplies are good until the first week of May.
That's
Pwera pa yung bago yung nilalak in nila ng mga bagong diesel orders before that.
Ang kuweba ba kayo nakatira? Walang crisis, walang emergency.
Sinabi ko na nga, non-crisis committee.
Walang increase sa mga presyo ng basic commodities. Sabi na nga ng DTI sa atin last week, ayaw nyo pa maniwala.
Ronald, that's what I want you to help me understand nga eh. Bakit there's no crisis but there is a crisis committee?
Non-crisis committee.
It's premonition
nga. Congressman premonition, di ba? Hindi kayo natututo eh. Mag-aral kayo maigi.
Sorry na. But okay, I mean, I don't know what the hesitation is about calling it a crisis or an emergency.
Panic.
There is a way.
Panic.
There is a way to manage it, right? You could. The upside of calling a state of emergency is, of course, it allows the government to step in and enact price controls. Suspend mga taxes nga and so on and so forth. But there is a way, feeling ko, to manage it without causing undue panic. The way that other countries...
I-appoint kita sa gobyerno.
Kasi your premise is that it's going to be managed.
Yes, there is a way
Tama.
to manage it.
Yun ang mali sa premise.
Hindi naman extremes. Mali, yun ba yung mali? Yun yung wrong verb.
Yun ang mali sa premise niya eh.
Balik ka na uli sa kuweba. Balik ka na uli.
Ang sinasabi ko lang, may mga ibang bansa na where their leaders have come out and acknowledged the crisis that the world is living in. At the same time, whilst working to ensure, there's no disruption to the supply, etc., etc. So, hindi naman just because sinabi mong crisis, magpapanik na agad tao. There's a way to manage it, di ba?
You used that word manage again.
Wala nga environment crisis eh. Hindi pa tayo umaabot sa point of no return. No? Lahat walang crisis.
Until the apocalypse hits, di ba?
Crisis? What crisis?
No, sabi nila,
Mabuhuli yung mundo, wala pa
Monday,
rin crisis.
pag Monday, you look on the bright side, ha?
Ayan, si Ami na naman, oh.
ano yung bright side, Ami? Sige nga.
Oo. Sinabi ko na, yung mag-order ng nagla-lock-in daw ng mga order, yung diesel.
Yung
Lock-in lang naman.
yung DTI, papuntahin mo ng palengke. Wala daw kasi increase eh. For 2 months. Papuntahin mo sila ng palengke.
For 2 months. Sa ngayon, wala pa naman. Namamalengke ako lagi.
Saka grocery.
Wala pa talaga sa ngayon. Sa ngayon. Pwera lang yung bigas.
Tumaas ang bigas
O yung bigas
Pero
tumaas na.
ilalock-in daw nila for 2
Matagal na
months
yung
eh.
bigas.
That's a guarantee given to them eh. Lock-in for 2 months.
But don't
Saka
forget,
yung ibang mga sa wet market na kailangan araw-araw i-deliver yon, nagtataas na sila.
Yung galunggong tumaas. Bumili ako ng galunggong. Galunggong tsaka pampano tumaas.
Yung mga yung araw-araw na dinideliver, yon. Nag-uumpisa sila sa wet market.
Ay, Bok, teka. Still on the oil issue, we have our mojo in the Senate giving us a report about bill filed by Senator Tito Sotto about the oil deregulation law. Okay, so Tito said...
Pwede ba rin ako introduce muna?
introduce na namin kanina, kaso tulog ka raw eh.
Oo nga, sabi ko may I go out ka.
Senate,
Hindi, nagkuhan ako state of emergency.
okay.
Okay.
Yun na
Kasi
nga.
ang sabi ni Jan, nakatulog ka daw.
Nag-state of emergency ako.
Buti ka pa may state of emergency, pero the bill that Ed is talking about is Senate Bill 1984.
Which
The
aims
year
to
that
return
the year that
regulation.
the year that Ronald was born, or no?
Ano ka ba? Hindi ganun ka bata si
Nandito
Ronald.
Orwell yun, 1984.
Kakaalis lang ni Erwin Tulfo
Orwell.
dito eh. Sa Palawan eh. Tsaka
yun
dito pa yung
Palawan.
8 congressman.
Yung sumama sa...
Pupunta sa pag-asa.
Oo.
Yeah, first time na
Hindi,
nakita
yung
yung
attend nung
First time na nakita yung head ng West Philippine Sea Committee ng House, saka yung Foreign Affairs Committee ng Senate.
sa Palawan,
First time sila nag-meet. Kamiting nila yung 500 fishermen, 1,000 students, tapos mga employees ng mga LGUs, saka yung mga military dito. Coast Guard, Marines, etc. Ganda nung kwan. Nakaka-inspire yung kwan nila. Alam na nila kung nasan yung coordinates na hindi pa alam
Magkakaroon daw Ronald ng 7 days, 6 night patriotic tours to Pag-asa beginning on April 28.
Yes.
Sponsored ng local government.
Yes. Nandito sila ngayon eh. Yung mayor at vice mayor ng Kalayaan.
7 days,
Balak nilang gawin parang i-normalize nila yung West Philippine Sea. So meron silang tourism, meron silang mga seminars. Maganda dahil
Patriotic tours.
nag-commit din yung Senate at House ng tulong.
Bok,
Mga schools, mga housing, gano'n.
Bok, we'll go back to that kasi in the second half of our show, we'll talk about the West Philippine Sea. So we'll go back to that in a bit. Kasi si Merimon is now waiting ready to give her live report.
Yes.
Merimon, kumusta sa Senado?
Bok,
Madaming
good afternoon.
bulaklak.
Parang,
Madaming
may
bulaklak.
burol.
Parang meron ba diyang
May
nakaburol?
burol ba dyan? May
Sorry.
burol.
Ako para sa Women's
Yun
Month
din
ito.
inisip ko.
Parang wake eh.
Akala ko nga wake.
Oh.
Women yan, yung women.
Yes, from past congresses
honoring
hanggang
women,
sa
diba?
present congress. Ito yung para sa Women's Month. Pero so far, dito ngayon sa Senado, ang nakaschedule pala kasi for the week ay ilang technical working groups ng committees. And tomorrow, merong nakaschedule na organizational meeting itong Protect or ito yung panel na binubuo ng mga senador para nga masiguro na mayroong contingency plans. Ito yung sinasabi nilang framework. Yung PROTEC, ibig sabihin yan, proactive response and oversight for timely and effective crisis strategy panel. So tomorrow, magkakaroon din ng briefing mula sa ilang mga departments or ahensya na concerned sa issue ngayon ng girian sa Middle East. That includes yung DMW, ang OWA, ang DFA, and other necessary na kakailanganin para matingnan kung ano pa raw yung maaring magawa para makatulong dito. Especially kapag kinukosyon na yung impact. Kaya kanina, yung ilan sa mga senador, halimbawa, sina Senate President Tito Sotto, kinukall out niya again yung mga oil companies na namimihasa raw sa paglalagay ng presyo, yung pump prices na mataas na. Ito yung sinasabi niya weeks ago na dapat bantayan daw ng DOE, bantayan daw ng mga ahensya kasi walang control ngayon, walang regulation powers ang gobyerno pagdating dito. Kaya nag-file nga siya nitong Senate Bill number 1984 na hopefully nire-repeal nito yung Oil Deregulation Act para nga ma-check nila kasi hindi raw nila alam magkano ba, kailan ba nakuha nitong oil companies itong crudo, yung langis o yung mga produktong petrolyo para makita kung overpricing ba ang ginagawa. Whereas may ilan naman daw mga gas station na hino-hold off as much as possible yung presyo or binababa para masiguro na ma-afford pa ito ng mga sektor. Ang nasabi naman ng ilang mga, yan yung nakikita natin ngayon na bigay rin daw sa kanya na kaibigan niya na businessman. So yan yung sinasabi niya na abusado na raw ang mga oil company na baka sobrang taas na ang nilalagay na presyo sa mga produktong petrolyo. But then again, yung ilang mga senador naman, halimbawa sina Senator Bam Aquino, sinasabi nila mahalaga rin daw na magdeklara na ng state of national emergency kasi currently nasa emergency level ng estado ng napakaraming pamilyang Pilipino. At ang sinasabi ni Senator Bam, kapag ka na-declare naman na state of national emergency, pwede na raw maglagay ng price ceiling sa essential goods. Malalabas na rin daw at mabibigay din yung transport para sa transport workers at saka MSMEs ang ayuda sa ilalim ng 2026 GAA. And ang sinisiguro naman nila, babantayan nila na yung benefits na makukuha from the emergency power na pinasana ng Congress na magbibigay ng emergency power sa Pangulo to either reduce or suspend ang excise tax sa mga produktong petrolyo, wala sa usapan ng VAT in general, magbe-benefit daw talaga ang mga normal na tao. Whereas si Senator Rizon Teveros naman, ang sinasabi niya again, is kakailanganin pa raw ng 52 billion worth ng supplemental budget para nga maibigay itong subsidy sa mga sektor na apektado. That includes the agriculture sector, yung fisheries, itong mga transport sector, and especially yung repatriation and reintegration ng mga OFW o ng mga Pinoy na uuwi sa Pilipinas from the Middle East. Balik sa inyo.
So basically, Marymon, kino-contradict ng Senate yung sinasabi ng Malacanang na walang crisis at walang emergency. Basically,
Ang sabi ni Senator J.
Nag-freeze.
Ayan, we'll try to get Marymon back.
Nag-freeze.
Mukhang nagka-crisis sa kanyang signal.
nagkaroon ng crisis. So.
Oh.
Ano ka ba, Ed?
Oh.
Don't be
Sino kaya?
causing
ang tanong
panic.
ko,
Ayan na siya ulit. Ayan na siya ulit.
Causing panic.
Oh, Marymon, Ronald was asking.
Bok, Sir Ronald, ang sabi ni Senator JB Ejercito, definitely the times are not normal. Yan ang sinabi ni Senator JB sa isang mensahe sa media. And so far, yung ilang mga senador, ang kinukol na talaga nila, hindi na raw sapat. It's important na maibigay na, mailabas na yung subsidies at mapabilis na raw ito. Ang sabi nga ni Senator Risa, yung 1,000 sa isang araw daw sa mga tsuper, especially sa mga jeepney driver, ngayon kulang-kulang na raw para sa kanila kasi malaking porsyento na nito ang ilalaan na nila sa pagpapagasolina, paglalagay, pagkakarga ng diesel. Kaya kailangan daw talaga ng supplemental budget. And so far, ang sabi naman ni Senator Risa, maaari naman daw tapyasan yung budget for the ASEAN 2026 hosting ng Pilipinas. Pwede rin daw sigurong kunin sa mga hindi na napagpatuloy na flood control projects and other funds na maaari pang pagkuhanan para mabuo itong 52 billion pesos na supplemental budget.
Marymon,
So Marymon, sino yung from your vantage point, sino yung nakatira sa kuweba? Yung Senado o yung Malacanang?
Okay.
Sino yung nasa kuweba?
Wait, Marymon, you don't have to answer that. Let me just break something. Peso closed at 60.3. That's another historic low. That's
Historic
another
low.
all-time low. Last time was last week lang when it closed at 60.10, and now we're at 60.30. And without any end to this war in sight, it doesn't look like that's going to be the floor at the moment. But coming back to your story, Marymon, yung 52 billion pesos, is that on top of the 30 that they initially allocated, or that's part of it?
Well, yung 52 billion pesos kasi so far doon sa ilalim na Senate Bill number 1986, ito yung 52.8 billion pesos na subsidy package. So ito yung supplemental budget na sila sabi ni Senator Risa. Sa ilalim nito, 12 billion pesos ang para sa transport subsidy, 2 billion pesos ang para sa agriculture and fisheries sector or yung subsidy sa kanila, and 38 billion pesos ang para sa repatriation and reintegration fund para sa mga migrant workers o sa mga OFW. Ito yung sinasabi pwede pang idagdag sa kakailanganin. Pero ang sabi naman kasi ni Finance Chair Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, pagdating daw dito sa proposal ni Senator Risa, dapat aralin din daw nila, especially yung pagkukuhanan nila ng pera. But then again, kung i-relate naman ito sa emergency power ng Pangulo, kapag altogether itong initiative sa ginagawa ng Congress para raw makusyon pa yung impact nga ng girian sa Middle East, maganda na rin na meron nga standby power itong Pangulo just in case lang daw nakakailanganin na talagang galawin ang excise tax. Kasi ang sinitingnan nila dito, may pondong pwedeng gamitin, pero may pondo rin o may pera rin sa bansa na pwedeng magalaw o mawala kapag nagalaw naman yung ibang aspeto nito, and that includes yung excise tax. Kaya, pero so far naman sinasabi nila kung ano rin kakailanganin daw ng mga ordinaryong Pilipino, yun naman daw yung bibigyan nila ng oras. Pero ang sabi naman ni SP Sotto, hinihintay pa raw nila yung transmittal ng enrolled bill ng House bago niya mapirmahan and matransmit na sa palasyo. So, walang explanation na binigay si SP. Ang sabi niya, tanungin daw ang Kamara tungkol doon.
Nerimon, baka pwedeng tanungin mo si SP Sotto kung nabasa niya yung history ng OPSF saka ng oil deregulation law. Kung ano nangyari sa Pilipinas nung ginawa natin yan at kung bakit siya tinigil. Baka pwede niyong tanungin.
Oo, Ami, dagdag natin siguro. Ang sabi kasi ni SP Sotto last time, dati raw meron silang questions dyan. Kaya nga yung pagboboto nila in favor of it, very questionable. Pero ngayon, parang it's about time daw na ibalik na yung regulation power sa gobyerno. And ang pinaka-pinaghuhugutan dito ni SP, yung na mga namimihasa nga raw na oil companies. And kung kaya naman daw ng ilang mga gas station nga na i-hold down pa yung presyo as much as possible. So, anong rason pa para sobrang taas na naman yung presyo or nagtitake advantage yung ilang mga kumpanya sa
Maraming
price?
maraming moving parts. Halimbawa, yung isa yung problema, yung sources ng oil natin.
Yes.
Simple-simple, no?
98% kasi ng source ng ating oil is Middle East.
Correct.
2% lang yung Brunei at saka Malaysia, yung pinakamalapit sa atin. So, parang, ba't ganon? So, hindi lang yung regulatory or non-regulatory functions yung sources
It's in the
alam naman
policy.
natin, napaka-volatile ng Middle East at napakalayo. But 98% ng ating lanis doon ang gagaling.
Okay.
Yun yung isa kailangan din i-review.
Yeah. So we'll leave you to talk to SP Sotto about that when you get a chance, but we'll leave that there for now. Thanks so much for your reporting. Mobile journalist Merimon Reyes live at the Senate.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
I had to cut that already because at this point we're going to bring in our first guest of the day. We're talking to Mr. Noel Baga. He's a co-convener of the Center for Energy Research and Policy. He's also a professor at the UP Department of Political Science. Good afternoon, Attorney Baga. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hello, good afternoon
Hi, Attorney.
po. Good afternoon po sa inyo at sa ating mga tagapakinig.
Nag-agree ba kayo, attorney, na walang crisis at saka emergency?
Meron ho talaga tayong seryosong krisis na nangyayari ho ngayon dito sa ating bansa. No? In just 1 week, tumaas ho by more than 20 pesos per liter yung diesel natin. At nasa 115 pesos per liter na ang diesel natin. At ito yung ginagamit ng mga pampasahero nating sasakyan tulad ng mga bus at jeepney. Marami na ho tayong mga bus at jeepney na who have stopped operating altogether dahil hindi na nila makayanan yung taas ng oil prices. Kaya nasa crisis ho talaga tayo ngayon.
Well, sir, you were quoted in the business world as saying na masyadong mabagal ang gobyerno at this point. But at the same time, at the same time, government still, the executive still insisting that there is no crisis. So
Pasensya niyo po yung heckler namin.
we're in that situation where the palace is saying there's no crisis, but everybody thinks there is.
Well, thank you for that, Sir Ed. I think the palace wants to project confidence within the business community. That's why it is approaching the crisis in that way. At sinusubukan naman niya gumalaw, nag-declare na yung gobyerno na magsisimula na sila mag-import ng oil. Ngunit sa aking pananaw ay hindi pa rin sapat ito. Ang kailangan ho talaga nating gawin, dahil nga meron talaga tayong emergency ngayon, kontrolin ang presyo ng langis. Itong mga temporary solutions lang ho, itong yung Euro diesel na gagawing from Euro 2, Euro 4, and then yung pag-suspend ng excise tax. Ito po ay mga temporary solution. Kasi habang tatagal pa ho itong oil crisis na to at tataas pa yung presyo ng langis. Kaya habang nangyayari yan, kawawa ho ang taong bayan. Kaya we have to address yung pinaka-importante po dito is taong bayan. Kaya kailangan po talaga natin ng price controls sa aking pananaw. Ito po yung kailangan. The President has to declare a state of emergency and impose price controls.
Sir,
sa paniniwala, yes po.
Sir, you say price controls kasi at the same time, I understand what you mean. There are several provisions in the law, actually several laws, that enable government to step in terms of crisis. For example, Section 14 of the oil regulation law allows for DOE to take over any company in the energy industry in times of crisis. So may mga ganun eh. On the other hand naman, may proposal si Senator Tito Sotto to quite simply abolish or repeal the oil regulation law. So you have, you might say, they also have some extremes. Where should we go, or what direction should we head?
I think very important. Ang importante ho dito yung short term kasi naapektuhan na ho yung taong bayan. So ang kailangan ho dito, may dalawang options po yung gobyerno in the short term. Yung una, naniniwala ho ako na pwede hong mag-price controls ang presidente ng Pilipinas by declaring a state of emergency and declaring oil as a prime commodity under the Price Act and the National Disaster Risk Management Act. So kung babasahin po natin itong dalawang batas na ito, may kapangyarihan ng presidente na mag-declare ng state of calamity, state of emergency, and based on that state of emergency declaration, mag-i-impose po siya ng price control sa oil para makontrol na ang presyo niya. And the second option is, kung ayaw nila yung approach na nun, magpasa na ng emergency powers ang Senate at House of Representatives, not just to suspend the collection of excise tax, but to give the President emergency powers para mag-price controls sa presyo ng langis sa bansa. Ito yung kailangan ng taong bayan.
Tama, attorney, sinasabi nyo, no? Dahil itong review ng oil deregulation, these are medium-term concerns. In the immediate, in the tactical moment, dinadeny nga na may emergency at saka crisis. So, alam mo, from your vantage point, naniniwala ba kayo na may 60-day reserve tayo? The maximum na hinihinging reserve? At this point, naniniwala ba kayo na meron tayong 60-day reserve? Alam mo, naunawaan ko yung ayaw ng gobyerno ng panic. Pero kailangan din kasi naghahanda rin especially yung gobyerno. In the immediate, dahil yung ibang usapin kasi, these are medium term. Okay, pag-usapan yan. Pero in the immediate, bakit wala?
Ayun po. So I think I respect your opinion, yung opinion ng iba, yung opinion ng iba is wala tayong enough reserves. Sabi naman po ng gobyerno, meron tayong 60-day reserve. Pero ito pa rin po ay hindi sapat, sa totoo lang. Kasi mabilis na kahit po totoo yun na meron tayong 60-day reserve, tatagal pa ho itong krisis na to. That is not enough. Ang kailangan ho talaga sana natin, dapat ho natagal na hong panawagan ito ng ibang sektor sa energy sector na mag-establish ho ng strategic petroleum reserve. The government has to step in. Kailangan ho na dapat sana nag-establish na yung gobyerno ng strategic petroleum reserve na crude oil stockpile sa Pilipinas para kung meron tayong emergency crisis tulad nito, pwede hong ibenta yung crude oil na yon at i-refine at ibenta at subsidized prices ng gobyerno. So yun ho sana yung ideal. But the problem is since the 90s parang ayaw hands off ang gobyerno pagdating sa energy sector, hindi siya masyadong nakikialam. In fact, during crisis like this, kailangan po natin makialam ang gobyerno. I just like to point out sa Great Britain, yung British Petroleum, dati ang pangalan nito Anglo-Persian Company. So dati private company to, pero ni-nationalize ito noong 1914 at the initiative of Winston Churchill, ni Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Kasi during that time meron tayong oil crisis sa Middle East. May oil crisis po nung time na yon at ang nangyari po, sinabi po ni Winston Churchill, hong Shell nang abuso, in-overprice yung prices ng oil sa Great Britain. So ni-nationalize yung Anglo-Persian Company which became British Petroleum kasi kailangan daw ng Great Britain ng government-owned oil company that can be a reliable source of energy and oil para sa British government, sa British Navy at sa British people. So ganun din po yung kailangan natin in the long term. Kailangan po talaga natin ng strategic petroleum reserve na gobyerno yung gagawa, mag-e-establish nito.
Attorney, hindi nasunod yung strategic reserve na yan eh. Pero yung sa naman yung short term yung price control, wala ka ba nakikitang problema sa implementation yan? Kasi sabi ng iba, baka tumigil ng pagbebenta yung mga yan, and what can we do if they stop selling? Saka yung kaya-kayang i-enforce ng gobyerno kung sakasakali, yung price control.
Kailangan wala naman po talagang choice yung gobyerno. I think we will eventually get into that situation later on. Kasi po, doon din talaga tayo papunta. Mayayaman po yung oil companies. So, kaya naman po nila yon na ang importante po yung taong bayan eh. Kasi kailangan po natin na ma-protect yung taong bayan. So pagdating po sa supply ng oil, nandyan po yung Philippine National Oil Company which can step in. Nasa powers po nila under Presidential Decree number 334 that they can import, market, distribute oil. So pwede hong mag-step in ang PNOC.
Mahalaga yung echo nung sinasabi mo Nag-echo yung boses mo, attorney Talagang dapat mag-echo yung mga sinabi mo, yung bayan muna, yung oil reserve, dahil kung hindi naririnig ng gobyerno.
Actually, everyone's very echoing.
Oo nga, lahat nag-echo.
Naka-reverb tayo sa video, okay?
Can we...
Parang nakikialam na yung universe, Rich.
Pero sir,
Reverb.
pero sir, how do other countries in the region go about it? Kasi for example, I understand that you have some countries in Southeast Asia that subsidize the oil prices. Some of them have hybrid systems. What's the best formula for us? What would work for us? We don't have our own oil production. We have only one refinery. We keep on importing. So what would be best for us? Of course, this is medium to long term.
In the immediate.
Maganda po sana na in the long term, meron tayong mix, na meron tayong private sector na vibrant, pero at the same time, meron tayong gobyerno na properly regulate itong private sector na ito. And at the same time, kailangan po natin gamitin ng Philippine National Oil Company. Alam niyo po, sa ibang bansa, gamit nila ang kanilang government-owned energy company. Sa Malaysia, Indonesia, kahit saan kayo pumunta, even sa Saudi Arabia, sa mga developing countries po, gamit ito. Kaya kailangan po natin gamitin yung PNOC na mag-establish ng strategic petroleum reserve, and then kapag may emergency crisis tayo, pwede siyang magbenta netong oil at subsidized prices. Pwede rin niya i-consider na magbenta rin ng oil in regular times sa government agencies. Again, ang British Petroleum po for 70 years was government-owned. This was only privatized in 1987 kasi na-recognize nila na kailangan ng gobyerno ng secure, stable source of energy. So, kailangan natin ng mas regulation.
Yeah.
Again, attorney, medyo medium term yan Parang in the immediate. No, dahil meron kang, oil deregulation law Diba? At it will take time para baguhin yan or even to review that. In the immediate, ano yung pwedeng gawin?
Ang kailangan po talaga price controls. Yun ang pinakauna. Kailangan i-freeze yung prices ng oil at a certain level. Kailangan po mag-step in ng gobyerno kasi kawawa po ang taong bayan. kung hihinto po ang ekonomiya kung hindi ho mag-price controls at maraming masamang pwedeng mangyari. So yun yung number one. And then pangalawa po yung subsidies. Tulungan po natin yung mga public utility vehicle operators na hindi na nakaka-operate. Tulungan po natin sila. Pero yung price controls, kailangan po talaga natin yun.
Won't that need
Attorney-
emergency powers? Won't that need emergency powers?
Sa opinion ko po, hindi na. Kasi meron po tayong Price Act at National Disaster.
Yes, attorney.
Hello po.
Nawala po kayo.
Nawala po. Opo. So sa opinion ko po, hindi na. Kasi meron na po tayong National Disaster Risk Management Act in connection with the Price Act. So sa opinion, kahit basahin niyo po yung oil deregulation law, wala pong sinasabi doon na pinoprohibit ang gobyerno na mag-impose ng price controls under the Price Act and the Disaster Risk Management Act. Wala pong nagsasabi doon na it removes the power of the government to impose price controls. So pwede pong mag-impose ang gobyerno ng price controls under these laws, Price Act, National Disaster Risk Management Act, or yung isa pang approach, magbigay na po ang Senado at House ng emergency powers sa Presidente para mag-price control. So dalawang option po. Pero sa personal kong pananaw, pwede na pong kailangan lang po ng Presidente mag-declare ng state of emergency at pwede na po siya mag-impose ng price controls under the Price Act and the National Disaster Risk Management Act. It is a misconception that the oil deregulation law prohibits the government from imposing price controls. Kahit po basahin niyo yun.
Yeah.
Yes,
Attorney. But yun nga, as you keep coming back to the critical requirement is the president first has to declare a state of national emergency before he can actually start capping fuel prices. And also, I wanted to make a short comment about what you said. I don't think BP is necessarily the best comparison here. England had capital, had the technology to develop, and they had the oil, more importantly.
They have the oil.
Oh, they had the oil to actually extract and develop and refine. We don't have that, or at least, I don't know if meron sa West Philippine Sea, but as of this point in time, we don't have that. So I don't think that's necessarily the best comparison. Perhaps we'd be closer to a Petronas kind of comparison if we want something that's more appropriate to what we have. Although, of course, Malaysia meron din oil
Oil.
reserves.
Yeah, they have oil.
Yeah, but my point here is in the short run, and you're talking about more government intervention, right? Have you come up with any ideas apart from suspension of taxes and also targeted subsidies at this point in the near term? Is there anything else out there?
So as I keep pointing out, what we really need are immediate price controls. We need to control the surge of the price of oil to help our consumers, because the Filipino people are suffering from these high oil prices. So the government really has to step in para ho pigilan na itong price increases ng oil. Kailangan ho talaga ng oil price controls. Yun po yung paniniwala ko. Ngayon, dun po sa comparison about British Petroleum, I'm just pointing out na kung bakit ho kailangan ng government-owned oil company. Kasi ho sa Pilipinas, nagkaroon ho tayo ng kultura since the 90s na kailangan nating i-deregulate, i-privatize lahat. No, we have been subject to this culture, capitalist liberal culture na anything government-owned is bad, which is not true. Again, even Great Britain had a government-owned energy company. Kasi po, kailangan natin ng secure source of oil, and government po yung pwedeng maka-provide nun at low prices.
Yeah, you know what the difference is, Attorney Baga, is the management of it, because you keep talking about bringing back regulation, but there was a reason it was abolished, right? Which is that the politicians mismanaged it. The
It was
OPSF.
mismanaged.
It was severely mismanaged, and it blew a hole in the national budget, and it forced the closure of the Central Bank of the Philippines. So there are very good reasons why we are where we are right now, which is na-deregulate tayo, because after that fiasco, people came to the realization that we shouldn't leave it in the politicians' hands, because they can't be trusted to bring down to raise the prices of oil, for example, when oil is high. They just kept leaving it to the government to subsidize, which eventually, yun nga, it really ate into the budget. So back to Ed's question earlier, which is that perhaps a hybrid type model would work better for us. Is there anything out there that you're seeing that could be more applicable to the context of the Philippines, wherein we don't want the politicians fully controlling the oil supply and oil prices?
Attorney, nakikita rin kasi natin, yung oil deregulation and free market is not working. Itong mga big players are raking a lot of money, pero lahat ini-impose sa consumers. So either side, hindi umuubre. Kaya yung iniisip natin, ano yung middle ground? Ano yung posible? Halimbawa, ngayon, tumaas ng more than 100% yung price ng oil sa Pilipinas. Pero yung ating mga ibang bansa, at most 37%. So, pwede nyo bang ipaliwanag bakit tayo sobrang taas yung increase? Tapos yung ating mga neighbors at yung ibang bahagi ng mundo, hindi naman ganun kataas ang increase. Is this the oil deregulation law? Is this the free market? Na talagang sobra yung increase ng ating price ng oil?
Yun po, sa bakit ganun kataas yung increase ng oil prices natin is mga oil companies po natin yan pwede tanungin. So, ang nangyari po kasi sa atin, we went to the extreme. Dati po kasi, so nakita natin, nagkaroon po tayo ng bad experience with governance, especially during yung dictatorship po, no? Nung before 1986. So, we went to the extreme side of the equation. Nag-deregulate po tayo and we gave all power dito po sa mga private oil companies na ito. And we have so little regulation po talaga. So little regulation. Gaya nga po oil deregulation law. Napaka-konti po ng powers ng government to intervene. At ang problema po dito, ito ang nag-i-impose po ng presyo, ito pong oil companies na to. And of course, all of them seek profit kasi that's what they are there for. They're all profit-oriented. And pangalawa po, ito pong mga oil companies, they cannot, kunyari, hindi po sila pwedeng mag-establish ng long-term strategic petroleum reserve kasi magastos po yun for them. There are limited po ang pwedeng gawin ng private oil companies to help people kasi po sila ay profit-oriented. So kapag magastos na po para sa kanilang isang bagay, kunyari, long-term, bakit 30 days lang ang inventory nila, ang required minimum 30 days lang. Bakit hindi 6 months? Kasi masyadong magastos yun for them. Ayaw nilang malugi. Kaya limitado lang po ang pwedeng gawin ng private oil company. So ang kailangan natin hybrid system na mag-reintroduce naman po tayo ng some government regulation sa energy industry. Kaya para po kailangan po 'yun eh. Kaya po pumapasok ang gobyerno para po tumulong sa taong bayan. Kung ano yung hindi kayang gawin ng private sector dahil magastos para sa kanila, doon po pumapasok ang gobyerno. Just to give you an example po, Napocor was created in the 1930s. Dati po, private sector lang po ang energy industry ng Pilipinas. Ngunit, ang binibigyan lang po ng kuryente ng private sector noon, yung malalaking cities. Kasi, with big populations, kasi doon sila kumikita ng pera. They did not provide electricity sa mga rural areas na maliliit ang populasyon kasi maliit ang kita nila doon. So that's why, during the time of President Manuel L. Quezon, and at the initiative na rin nila General Douglas MacArthur, in-establish po yung government-owned National Power Corporation para ang gobyerno ang magpo-provide ng kuryente sa mga rural areas with smaller populations para mabigyan sila ng kuryente. Yung mga lugar na hindi po maserbisyuhan ng private sector, gobyerno ang tutulong doon. Kasi yun naman talagang ang mandato ng gobyerno ang tumulong sa taong bayan. So, maganda po, mixed system po tayo. Na let's have a dynamic private sector, okay? Maganda po yung initiative nila. Maganda po yung they can infuse money sa ating energy industry. That's good. Pero at the same time, we have to reintroduce some regulation po talaga kasi we went to the far extreme na halos wala po talagang regulation. We have to introduce regulations and also the government has to step in na tumulong sa taong bayan at mag-impose ng price controls at merong reserbang crudo, may reserve oil para tumulong naman sa taong bayan during times of emergencies.
You're right. I think we keep swinging from one extreme to the other.
Pero sir, just to ask a question based on what you just said a while ago, if we do impose price controls, who will shoulder the balance? Will it be the oil companies or will it be government through subsidies? For example, mag-price control ng gobyerno, declare an emergency. Who's gonna take the balance?
Considering attorney na yung fiscal space mo maliit. Considering na yung revenues mo hindi ganun kalaki.
So kailangan po ito na pag-usapan maigi ng ating ng gobyerno, na kailangan pag-usapan nila maigi to. Pero kailangan din po kasing magsakripisyo ng konti ng oil companies natin. So kailangan lang kung i-determine ano po ba yung reasonable na price control na pwedeng gawin, and then tignan ng gobyerno yung subsidies, saan ba niya pwedeng ilagay strategically place these subsidies. No? But definitely we need the price control kasi tatagal pa tong crisis na to, and even itong short term, of course it's good at may initiative yung gobyerno, pero these are short term solutions eh. Eventually tataas pa ho talaga yung presyo pa rin ng langis, especially with the ongoing conflict. There's any sign of stopping from both sides. Wala ho talagang nagko-compromise. Kaya mukhang tatagal po ito. We will cross that issue talaga para papunta po tayo sa price controls, and we have to plan ahead. At sa tingin ko kailangan na po talaga ngayon. Yes.
So you're saying, sir, it should be a shared, it should be shared by both government through subsidies and oil companies as far as oil ceiling, price ceilings are concerned. Let me also ask a question asked by Raul kanina, pero in a different way. Kasi Raul kanina was asking, bakit mas mataas yung pag-increase ng mga presyo natin dito compared to other countries in Southeast Asia? Is it because the oil companies are overpricing in the Philippines, or is it because the other countries are giving more subsidies to benefit their population?
Or both?
Or both?
It's both. This is a combination of both. Meron ho tayong mga subsidies ng oil sa ibang bansa, and at the same time, prerogative din naman, as you know, dahil under the oil regulation law, prerogative din ng mga oil companies yung pagpepresyo sa kanilang oil. Ganun din naman ho sa presyo ng kuryente. For the past 20 years, 2001 ho tayo nagka-IPIRA, Electric Power Industry Reform Act. It was supposed to bring down prices, pero for the past 20 years, nasa top 2, top 3 highest electricity prices tayo sa buong Asia. Consistently po yan. Nasa top 1, top 2, top 3. 20 years. So, ano hong nangyari dun sa promises ng IPIRA na mapababa yung presyo? So, bakit mataas ang presyo ng kuryente? Kasi ito yung ginagawa ng private sector na pagpresyo, and at the same time, walang subsidies from the government. We're one of the few countries na walang subsidy sa buong Asia. Yung ibang bansa ho, Vietnam, Thailand, Korea, may mga subsidies sila sa electricity prices. So it's a combination of both lack of subsidies from the Philippine government, and at the same time, yung prerogative ng private energy oil companies ho natin. We have to shift our thinking. Nagbabago na ho ang mundo eh. Dati ho kasi ang thinking natin, deregulate, liberalize, forget the government, we don't need the government. Ngayon nakikita, nagbabago na ho ang mundo.
Yeah.
And I think we are starting to see we need the government to intervene when necessary to help and protect the people.
And the other factor, I guess, is the depreciating peso, because oil imports are paid for in US dollars. So in the last several weeks, since the start of the year, actually, the peso, the currency has been losing ground. But we'll leave that there. Thank you so much for talking to us today, Attorney Noel Baga, co-convener of the Center for Energy Research and Policy. Salamat, sir.
Salamat,
Thank you, Attorney.
Maraming salamat po sa inyo at sa ating mga tagapanood.
To end, wala si Ronald. Where's Ronald?
Dito.
Diyan.
Ronald,
Nandito ako eh. Gusto mo lang yata, mawala ako eh.
Kahit wala dyan sa studio, nag-aaway kayo.
Parang yun ang hugot mo. Nandito ako, linaw-linaw.
Nasa Palawan. Nasa Palawan si Tito Ronald.
Wala na dyan, nag-aaway pa rin kayo.
You're telling
Nabalanto ng free market at saka state control.
So to your point earlier about Nakalimutan ko na tuloy sabihin ko. To your point earlier about us importing 98% of our crude, something that I keep bringing up is that's for raw crude. Yung finished petroleum products, we buy it from mostly Asian countries. Pero yung raw, galing 98% nga sa Middle East. And the problem with that is only Petron is able to refine. Exactly. There's only one refining plant in the country. That's Petron's facility in Bataan. And the problem with that is they import all this Brent, this crude, they refine it, and then they sell it to the local players. So may dagdag pa na pass-through cost there.
May patong pa.
A few weeks ago, Petron reported record high profits for 2025. 2025 ha, wala pang war in Iran. 15.6 billion. That is an 84% surge compared to the previous year. So,
Pero Reg, tanong ko lang, paano most if not all our neighbors are subsidizing power? They're subsidizing energy. Parang tayo lang ang hindi. Even Japan and Korea are subsidizing power dahil public consumption yan eh.
Yeah.
Hindi
Public
necessarily
utility good.
profit motive lamang ang dapat mag-dominate dyan. Okay yung profit. Pero pag lumampas na ron, trabaho ng any government na magkaroon ng affordable source of electricity halimbawa
correct.
or energy. Tayo, ang alam ko, tayo lang ang walang subsidy eh.
Because because you're subsidizing politicians.
Oo, siyempre. Oh. Tama. May
Ikaw
mistake.
naman, ikaw ha?
May mistake.
Balik ka nga sa kuweba.
Balik ka nga sa kuweba.
That's his answer,
Nahawa ako doon sa isa dyan. Oh.
Kanino?
Yeah.
Yung isa, yung nahawa ako dyan. Oh.
Kanino nga?
Yung nasa kuweba sa Forbes Park. Oh.
But, I mean, na-mention mo na rin yung sikat eh. Fiscal space. Like, take out the corruption part of the problem, right? There's also limited fiscal
Trillion
space.
yun, trillion.
Yes.
Hindi, lahat naman ng bansa may problema sa corruption eh. Pero, ibig sabihin, in spite of that, ay nasa-subsidize itong mga gamit ng lahat ng tao. Katulad ng
Hybrid
sinabi
sila
niya,
doon eh, hybrid eh.
wala namang mag-i-invest sa rural areas eh, sa electricity na walang
True.
kita eh.
True.
Diba? Walang kita ron eh. So, dapat gobyerno ang pupuno nun. In a way,
Hybrid
meron ka-
sila sa ibang bansa. Hybrid sila sa iba.
It's a hybrid model. Hindi siya fully deregulated. The state can step
Hybrid.
in. And the other thing about Japan is, of course, is they've been building up their reserves for years. They have
Although Japan has the highest cost of power in Asia.
Yeah, but these things are not new eh. Ibig sabihin,
They're not.
diba? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's happening all over the place.
So alam mo na, because you said these problems aren't new, alam mo na tatanungin ko. So why didn't you do something about it when you're in Malacanang?
Yes, we did. Stable ang po nun, ang electricity sources nun. Although, ayun na, long term, may problema. No? Pero, nung
Siguro
panahon na
after
yun,
this
stable,
crisis, after this crisis, mapag-uusapan niya na we better develop hybrid models, no? Para sa mga basic na pangangailangan natin. Di ba?
Wala nga crisis,
For
Ani.
everything yun eh, pati to attract investments. Kasi matagal na rin yung nirereklamo ng mga investor. High power cost. Di ba?
And the other side of this, of course, is yung to ramp up yung renewable energy sources.
Yeah.
Which until now, I know may target tayo to make it 30% of the power supply mix by
Yeah.
2030. I don't know how close we are to that target. And then remember as well, they had to
They
cancel...
need to offer more incentives, di ba? Pati
Yeah.
natural gas, sabi nila, kulang sila ng incentive for natural gas exploration.
Halimbawa, itong EPIRA, dati pa namin pinopropose na i-review. Dahil yung nangyari yan at a different time. Diba? Nangyari yan nung 90s, early 90s eh. Iba na. That was 30 years ago.
Oil crisis yan.
20.
Diba?
28.
Iba yun eh. So, talagang dapat yan i-review na.
Oh. So at that time, okay pa rin deregulation. Deregulation was still the answer to many of these problems that were created with the state having so much control
Hindi,
over
sabi
things.
mo nga, mahalaga kasi na yung gobyerno ay matino. Diba? May ganung
Yan ang
klaseng
problema natin eh.
May ganung interplay kasi yung gobyerno at
Yes.
saka yung private sector. Diba? Kung wala yon, talaga magkaka-crisis ka with or without the Iran war.
Okay naman kasi yung the principle behind the OPSF, the Oil Price Stabilization Fund. The intent was good. The problem is they mismanaged it, right?
It was abused.
Kasi sino nga ba naman gusto magtaas ng oil prices, right? So nobody wanted to be the bad guy. So they just kept subsidizing hanggang wala ng pera, right? So
Hindi, pero Reg, kahit kasi may problema, the government can call the big players to share the burden.
yes.
Kung Ang problema, kung hindi takot yung big player sa gobyerno, kung tingin nila, they can just disregard that
Yes.
phone call.
Yes.
Di ba?
So,
Kaya siguro yun yung isa naming kaibahan. Pag tumawag si Pinoy, medyo nakikinig yung mga big players. No? Dahil alam nila na may gagawin sa kanila. Ngayon parang walang takot eh.
I would think na there should be a way here to talk to Petron, being the only refining facility in the country,
Yes,
right? As I
yes.
said, they had record high profits last year, so I'm sure they're in a strong position this year. There has got to be a way to, kasi sila din nagsusupply sa mga local gas stations eh. Sila yung nagre-refine,
Yes.
binebenta sa local oil stations. So baka naman pwedeng minimize the profit when they sell to the local players, right?
Yeah. Lagi ko inuulit, Reg, we have a strong presidential system. Use that. Tatawagan mo lang eh. Di ba? Gusto nyo bang investigahan kayo ng BIR? No?
Anong sabi
Sigurado
niyo,
ko naman, hindi kayo nagbabayad ng tamang taxes eh.
Ron, anong sabi niyo?
kailangan-
Anong sabi ni Romulo Neri about greed?
Moderate your greed.
Moderate your greed.
Moderator.
Pwede kasing
Moderate
tawagan
your
eh.
greed.
Pwede bang mag-share naman kayo ng burden or else baka magkagulo. At pag nagkagulo, pati kayo tatamaan, hindi lang gobyerno.
That's also
Ganun ba?
true. That's also true. If magkaroon man ng, if we reach a point where fuel is not enough and there are civil riots, then sila din ma-affected, di ba?
Lahat tayo. Kaya it is in your interest na ma-mitigate itong crisis na non-crisis. Ma-mitigate itong emergency na non-emergency. Di ba?
Indeed.
Pero may tatawag.
May tatawag.
May tatawag.
Tawagan
Because
mo
the
na.
government, the presidency is very powerful.
Tawagan mo na.
Kahit may oil deregulation law.
The oil price hike that's
Kita pa
being
nyo sa
projected
ngayon,
next week, 11.88
No,
for
that's tomorrow.
11.88 for diesel,
Yeah, bukas yan.
6.47 for gasoline, 13.66 for kerosene, which would take us to nearly 130 pesos. Well,
Yes.
no, not yet. About 120 something pesos per liter of gasoline.
Tapos tataas uli yan sa Friday.
Well,
Dahil
unless,
wala kasing emergency eh. Wala
for-
kasing crisis.
Don't forget, Iran has 48 hours to
Yeah.
kundi
Until Wednesday.
bobombahin na. Okay,
Yeah,
we have to go on a
Wednesday.
very short break. You're watching Storycon on One News. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is the Story Conference Group or the Storycon Group.
Welcome back to Storycon. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Ed Lingao, and still with us, Rol Llamas and Ami Pamintuan. And also joining us this afternoon is the director of the Sea Light Gordian Knot Center and the maritime security expert Ray Powell. Sir, good afternoon and magandang hapon. Yun na.
Thank you.
Even yun naman lang na pwede.
Magandang hapon to you too.
Maritime security expert or spy?
Look, actually, I don't think I'm very good at either one.
Really?
Well, first
I'm
of all, if I
starting-
was a spy, I would probably spend a little less time on television. And if I was a maritime security
You
expert,
could be like really covert.
it's the beard.
Thank you, Ray Powell, because of you, yung mga bumabanat sa akin are lesser. You're more notorious than me.
So tell us about this word war that you've been waging with the Chinese embassy here.
Look, I don't know. I didn't go into it intending to wage a word war. We were just doing some work on what we saw happening in Chinese language media in Manila and Chinese language education, and of course the Chinese embassy has a big role in that, and so they came off the top rope, as we would say in professional wrestling. They were pretty excited about that. So I think it's been 8 different times they've put out long posts about Sea Light and Ray Powell, and I mostly I just kind of am amused by it. It's just sort of odd. So.
But tell us about your findings. Sea Light's been doing investigations on
Yeah.
influence operations.
Yeah. Well, and so what we decided to do was everybody knows about sort of like the Asian century people or some of these folks who are out there all the time in Tagalog and in English. But very few people know about kind of the beating heart of the Chinese influence operation, which is mostly taking place in Mandarin language here in Manila. And part of the reason we were so fascinated by that is this is the place that they actually tell you really what they are planning and what they are doing, because they don't really expect anybody to be listening. And so, we just went in and we started digging in and we said, well, what are they talking about? So we learned all about this thing called the Philippine Council for the Promotion of the Peaceful Reunification of China.
How do you dig in?
So AI is a big help.
Okay.
Google Translate, obviously for those of us who don't speak Mandarin. Now, of course, we have to run it by people who actually do speak Mandarin to make sure that we're getting it right. So we have to check and double check all of these things. But it turns out that AI can be a really good research assistant,
Yeah, absolutely.
So you say, tell us, what this person's relationship is to this organization. And first AI will come back and say, well, we're not really sure. And say, well, let's start with this. What is this person's Chinese name?
Right, okay.
Okay, and now look for that in the Chinese language. Oh, now we'll learn a lot of new things. So, yeah.
So you've been trolling through their Facebook posts?
Wow, trolling. That's
Not trolling, not Trolling,
trolling.
Trolling.
TRAW.
Not trolling.
No, but
Trolling.
what are your findings? What are your findings?
Yeah, so what we found is that, first of all, a lot of the same people who are working on the reunification of China things, or are sort of listed as advisors or consultants or officers in that organization, are also involved in Chinese language media. For example, the person who is the Secretary General, so basically the leader for like the last 15 years of the Peaceful Reunification of China Council, this is a directly controlled by the Chinese Communist Party through the United Front Work Department.
You would think so, yeah.
And well documented. I mean, it's sort of documented globally. That's how these go. He is also the editor-in-chief of United News Philippines, which is a Chinese language news organization. We dug into the Philippine Chinese Education Research Center, which is building basically a brand new center even now. And actually that was where we discovered this essay contest that they did last year, in which they were trying to paint Japan as being still threatening, and gathered all of these essays from around, and most of them came from the Chinese language schools, but they also pushed it through the Department of Education out into a lot of the public schools, and got essays back from public school students as well. And I don't think these students necessarily knew what they were getting into, and I don't think they necessarily were thinking, I need to do this because I don't like Japan.
Are you sure that was the theme, though? Could the students have come up with that themselves?
So the theme was essentially put out in the letter from James Wang, whose Chinese name is Huang Duanmin, was pushed out together with the letter under Department of Education Circular number 107, around to all of these public schools. Now, again, I think probably the students had some flexibility as to what they decided to write up. What they didn't probably know, and I'm pretty sure they didn't know, was that this is part of a broader, even global effort in 2025 that the Chinese Communist Party undertook to paint Japan as being a still threatening enemy. So really all of 2025, because it was the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, was kind of devoted to this theme. So again, I think that what ended up happening was the public schools really didn't realize it, the students didn't realize it, probably the parents didn't realize it, but this was the broader enterprise that they were sort of caught up in.
But Ray, the Department of Education should realize it.
Look,
So are you saying that the Department of Education or some people in the Department of Education are consciously helping this foreign malign
I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think the Department of Education, look, I worked in the largest bureaucracy in the world for 35 years in the Department of Defense in the United States. Bureaucracies do strange things all the time. They get in a letter, they say, okay, well, here we go, staple this thing out, send it to everybody. So I don't know what the intent was. It may have been no intent whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I do know what the intent of the CCP's program was, and I think that the Department of Education and the public schools here in Manila kind of got caught up in all of that.
So the topic or the theme was pre-selected and endorsed
Yeah.
through the DepEd to
And the way it was
schools.
presented to them, to be fair, the way it was presented to them is, look, Filipinos and Chinese both fought the Japanese in World War II. They sort of fought side by side, if you were. Well, this is kind of true, but I mean, in a way, I suppose. And so, write us an essay about that. So I mean, I don't think it sounds on the face of it necessarily nefarious until you realize that it's part of this broader effort and actually a very coordinated united front operation. That in the end, a bunch of these essays are all going to end up in this bound volume with a very propagandistic title that will have all the essays together, explaining to everybody why Japan was, of course, back then,
the
Imperial
problem,
Japan.
Ray, is that these are all happening on the context that spies have been discovered. Spies have been discovered, and there are more spies inside government. So either some people in the bureaucracy are part of this foreign malign project, or they're idiots.
Look, Ronald, I mean, I think certainly, I'm sure that there are people who are actually doing bad things for bad reasons. Some people probably just miss things. I tend to take a broad-minded approach and say, look, this is a very sophisticated foreign interference operation. That's why I think that the response is going to have to be well considered by the Philippine government and say, how do we, in an open society, in a democracy, without stigmatizing people, just because they happen to be of a certain race or ethnicity or things like that, how do we protect our society, including, by the way, Chinese Filipinos who didn't necessarily ask for this, right? There may be a few who did, but I think probably most of them are just trying to go out and live their lives and run their businesses and,
absolutely.
go to school and all of the rest of those things. They are actually the first victims in all of this.
But the topic that you mentioned a while ago did not seem that
Nefarious.
controversial. The Chinese and the Filipinos fought the Japanese in the
Because
last World War.
If you go out and say, tell me why Japan is a threat to the Western world.
Oh, so that was part of the...
No. What I'm saying is the broader
It's a lot more
the broder
elegant.
program was all about casting Japan as a threat. If you're going to try to push out an essay contest into the public schools, it's not going to get through if that's the theme. So it's more of a soft approach to bring in the public school students. Now, a bunch of these students ended up getting invited to the Peaceful Reunification Gala in October, were given their certificates up on stage with everybody there, and the Chinese chargé d'affaires was there, and it was a big gala. So it is interesting to see how all of these things sort of come together on the education side, on the media side, on the reunification side. And that was what we found so interesting about the whole, this whole world that we've been digging into.
So because there's a circular. So in short, as I said earlier, it could be that in the context of the spy rings being discovered in government, the option is that perhaps there are people inside who try to use this for these purposes, or we're just plain stupid.
Look, I think there are some people who are ideologically aligned with China, for sure. And there, by the way, that is, I don't think, under Philippine law, I don't think that's illegal. If you want to be ideologically aligned with China, that's your right as a Philippine citizen, right? You live in a democracy.
Not war anyway.
We don't have treason laws in peacetime.
Exactly. I think also there are people who probably get paid. I think a huge part of this is there are a lot of people out there who know that if you want to be a successful business person doing business with certain companies, maybe who have contacts in the mainland and that kind of thing. That these are the things you have to do to be successful. These are and it doesn't seem like a big deal when you're doing it. Okay, you have to go to this party. I have to be considered a consultant on this board. A lot of the people I think are just doing what they think they need to do to have a successful business, educational experience, or whatever, and they're not doing it with malicious intent. They're just doing it because that's what you got to do.
Let me pivot a bit, Ray, and look at the broader picture. I mean, you came to be known to us as someone who is an advocate for maritime transparency, and you look at what's going on out there in the West Philippine Sea. Now there's talk of the Foreign Affairs working out maritime joint patrols cooperation agreement with China. To which apparently the Philippine Coast Guard was not a part of. They're not part of those discussions. But in any case, there is a plan that the Philippines and China could start this as soon as, I don't know, next month. What did you think of that? What are the risks there?
I think that I'm as interested as everyone else to know what this would actually look like, right? So, for example, China and Vietnam have joint patrols that happen along the demarcation line that's sort of up between Hainan Island and the northern part of Vietnam, but they settled that boundary decades ago. And so all they do is they go back and forth along the boundary with the Chinese staying on this side, essentially, and Vietnam staying on this
okay.
side.
They keep to their
joint
lines.
patrols.
Okay.
Yeah. And so
It's like the DMZ.
right. But so how would they do that in the West Philippine Sea? Where is the line, right?
Right.
Because China has a certain idea of where the line should be, and it's very close to Luzon,
Right.
Or to Palawan. What does that look like in the West Philippine Sea? I have no idea. I don't know. This comes back to the whole question. We've had this discussion before, Reggie, about what does the code of conduct look like, right? Because who gets to enforce the code of conduct? Who gets to bind
There
people?
is no enforcement mechanism.
Well, that's the thing that
At the
everybody
moment.
says is the problem,
Right.
right? So how would you make an enforcement mechanism? Because somebody would have to be the enforcer, and who would that be that everybody could accept? So I just don't know what this whole thing would look like. Now,
Isn't this, Ray, just the tip of the iceberg? Because you're advocating transparency, like most of us are doing. Because transparency is our power against China. If the whole world knows what's happening in the West Philippine Sea, then we have their support. But if our Department of Foreign Affairs is negotiating secretly, like this joint Coast Guard patrol, with our Coast Guard not even knowing that they are going to have a joint Coast Guard patrol, then there is something wrong.
I
There's
don't want to
something
prejudge
wrong
you, Rob.
going on, because if we lose the transparency project,
I'm the American coming in telling the Philippines how they should do their business. I don't want to do that. I'll let you guys talk about that one.
The loaded word there might be secretly. I think the government might take offense to that.
Well, so-
maybe
and
it's not
to be-
secretly,
and to
but
be fair-
certainly we're not privy to those discussions.
And to be fair, I've worked in government. You don't tell everybody everything all the time. I get it, right? But I do think, ultimately, transparency is the friend of democracies, because, the friend of autocracies is ultimately secrecy, right? We're not going to tell you what's really happening. We're not going, we are going to have our Ministry of Truth, and we will tell you what the truth is. So how do you fight back against that? Ultimately, I think you have to do it as a democracy, as a free society, and use transparency to your advantage.
Right.
I think it's
Ray,
fundamental.
what's
if
your
the Coast Guard
situation now
doesn't
between
even know
you?
that they're part of a joint Coast Guard patrol project. I think that's very fundamental.
Yeah. Amy?
Yeah, Ray, what's the situation now between you and the embassy? How are your exchanges of
We're not
it's not a
exchanging Christmas
conversation,
cards.
The exchange of messages.
I didn't get a single
Exchange
Lunar
of
New Year
messages.
card from them. I was really disappointed.
Yeah.
Look, I think that we're just, we put out our reports and they put out their social media statements. I think that's our relationship. It's not like we had a relationship before, so I guess I don't have anything to compare it to. But certainly since the new ambassador came in, they've taken a much more aggressive stance. A lot of Filipinos are aware of that. Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism obviously has been attacked. There have been various legislators and other people. Of course, Jay Terriella is leading everybody in the social media post race, since he's been attacked probably over 20, 25 times. So, I mean, I'm coming in for my share.
Okay, the Chinese ambassador said that the draft Coast Guard cooperation agreement is 95% complete. That's almost complete. Okay, and that
Still about 5% to go, Ed. We still have a chance.
It will only involve environmental protection, trash collection, and search and rescue operations. And I remember reading somewhere that it's not going to involve joint patrols because of, I guess it's going to be
I
very
think
iffy.
that would be really hard. And you know what? I mean, so obviously you're always trying to find ways to lessen the tension, right? And I get that.
But the Chinese ambassador has said it could include joint patrols, and that's where all this kerfuffle started,
yeah.
right?
could
Because
involve.
the idea that there's an agreement on the table that could include joint patrols, but the Coast Guard, the Philippine Coast Guard, has not been consulted on it.
Maybe it
That's
involves
what's shocking.
joint patrols on trash collection
In which case, it's BFAR.
A lot of trash.
or environmental protection.
You asked me what the
they're
danger. The
exploring
danger is
joint
really
areas
that
of,
you normalize
cooperative
around.
activities.
Sorry. Go ahead, Abby.
Yeah, that's what the embassy says. I think they're exploring areas of cooperation for certain activities outside Coast Guard
Non-controversial
and
activities, I suppose.
well, typical Coast Guard and military activities.
Okay.
And I think this is part of a build-up towards the possibility of a code of conduct.
Yes.
In ASEAN, while we are chairman of ASEAN this year. The problem is, for now, 10 years ago, China doesn't want to have a code of conduct because they're not yet in total control of the South China Sea, and their artificial islands are not yet fully made.
Yeah.
But now that their artificial islands are the size of
It will
cities,
legitimize.
then a code of conduct may legitimize that and undermine our victory in UNCLOS. That's why the code of conduct may be positive at particular moments. No?
I
And if the
basically-
negotiations are secret,
I
then
basically
what code
agree.
of conduct are we talking about? If it's secret.
My concern always, and as you guys know, I've said this many times, I think even on this show a couple of times, I am a code of conduct pessimist. I don't see where the path forward is. A code of conduct that would be acceptable to the People's Republic of China would almost certainly undermine the Philippines' rights under UNCLOS, as you mentioned. Because eventually what would happen, I believe, is that China would say, look, we have this nice new code of conduct. We no longer require UNCLOS for the South China Sea because the code of conduct supersedes it. And that, as you say, Ronald, that would then allow them to say, and this just confirms that the arbitral ruling is null and void because we're not even worried about UNCLOS for the South China Sea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ronald?
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. You have a secret code of conduct for a UNIN. You have a secret code of conduct for the Coast Guard, joint patrols. So these secret agreements are piling up. No? And again, the negotiations for the code of conduct is also secret,
Malacanang
which
will
is
not
very,
like...
which is very
the
defining.
code of
no?
conduct.
The code of conduct is defining.
The Code of Conduct is an annual ritual, right? Every January, whoever the ASEAN chair is says, this year,
We are
going
gonna
to
make it
have
happen."
it.
We will sign it.
We're going to make it happen. You know, we're going
As President Marcos did. He didn't promise, but he said, that's what we're going to try to do, get it done.
You know what? God bless him. I'm just not going to hold my breath.
Okay, listen, before we run out of time, I did want to zoom out a little bit and talk about this war in Iran and the relevance there for U.S. allies like the Philippines being, there's now questions over whether the U.S. would actually come and step in if China does blockade Taiwan or does something in the West Philippine Sea, in the South China Sea. Being that, the argument being that, well, now they're tied up trying to sort out the war in Iran and Ukraine and so on and so forth, they might move assets over to that side of the world and less so on Indo-Pacific.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously, the United States has moved a lot of assets to the Middle East. Now, it's not the first time, right? I mean, I was there for some of those times. I was a part of some of those efforts. while I was serving. In the end, as I have always said, a treaty alliance, which is what the U.S. has with the Philippines, it does not actually have a treaty alliance with Taiwan. It has public law. It has a kind of a bunch of other things that apply to Taiwan. But a treaty alliance ultimately is a political document. For example, so if the U.S. were to be seen to have failed to uphold its treaty obligations, there's no court that would rule against the United States because there's no court of treaties, right? It's a document signed and ratified by two different governments that commits each one to one another. But again, an abrogation of a treaty alliance does not. There's no court. There's not even like an arbitral, tribunal. So what would happen though? What would happen is if the U.S. were to be seen to have failed in its treaty obligations, then that would have implications for every other treaty ally the U.S. has, because they would have to say if the U.S. doesn't do it for the Philippines, then what does that mean for Japan or South Korea or Australia or NATO or anybody else that the U.S. has a treaty alliance with? That's why treaty alliance. That's how they work, and that's why upholding treaty obligations is so critical.
But
Okay.
I mean, what we've seen from out of this war in Iran is that apparently the institutions aren't strong enough to keep President Trump in check. Apparently he can go and, he's supposed to ask permission from Congress, but he went ahead and started this war. And therefore, the question is, in the end, is it just one man deciding whether or not to send military aid to allies, or is it the whole U.S. institution?
I would say, okay, so two things. One is the fraying of this relationship between the executive in the United States and the legislature has been happening for a while.
Yeah.
So it's been since, it's been over almost 80 years, really, since we've talked about declarations of war, right? Even Korea was not a declaration of war. So it's been since World War II, since there has been the U.S. president going to the Congress, getting a declaration of war, and going to war. Hasn't happened since then. Instead, we've had these things called the authorization for the use of military force.
Yes, exactly.
And every president since 9/11 essentially has come out, and actually since Iraq, I would say, has come out and said, remember the one that we did all the way back then? It's still good.
Yeah.
It's still good for this thing that we're doing over here, right? So, that we've seen presidents I think what we've
Stretch
seen
the
with
definition of that power.
and what we've seen from Donald Trump is he's stretching it more than
more than
most,
any
right?
other president. That's
I
right.
would love to see it come back together, right? I would love to see our own Congress develop a backbone and say, no, we're not going to be funding all of these crazy things that every single president seems to want to do under this old thing, right? Now, many of these things may be perfectly worth doing, but I would like to see that balance in our own government return. I would like to see, frankly, the U.S. get together with allies, build a case, say, even if the case is flawed, the one in going into Iraq, everybody knows now was flawed, right? There were supposed to be weapons of mass destruction. Turned out they weren't there.
That's a really benign way to put it.
I honestly believe it was a mistake.
Of course.
I don't believe
it was a disastrous mistake.
No, I think that they actually did think that they were there. I don't think that they lied.
But right now, there's uranium in Iran.
Yeah.
What's that?
The uranium.
Well, I think we know that that's there. Regardless, I would like to see a return to some of those institutional safeguards.
Absolutely.
But with this president,
Whatever goes.
treaties are also not enough to keep him in check.
Yeah.
For example, NATO and
Trump,
Greenland.
Trump and safeguards
So to be
are
fair,
contradiction in terms.
believe it or not, we did not actually make Greenland the 51st state. So
Yeah, well-
that actually didn't happen.
Yet.
Lots of very
Yet.
strange things were said.
For how many months was he fantasizing
And-
about it in
and-
public?
And now Cuba.
Pretty sure that nobody has yet found a penguin in Greenland. So I think that's also not true.
I think the
Trump
bottom.
and safeguards are contradiction in terms.
Yeah.
I kind of think that, we go through moments as the United States.
So the United States is
moments.
having a moment right
We're
now.
having a moment, okay?
Again, that's a really benign way of putting it. You're having a moment, and so let's wreak havoc across the world, mess up the global oil supply chain, shall we? Lucky President Trump doesn't watch Storycon, but we'll leave that there. Thank you so much for joining us today, maritime security expert Ray Powell. Thanks for joining us on Storycon today. I'm Mipa Mituan, Editor-in-Chief of the Philippine Star. Ronald Llamas, a resident political pundit. Join us again tomorrow at 4 p.m. Again, for Storycon, I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Ed Lingao, kapatid. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
This is the Story Conference Group or the Storycon Group.